Good evening. Welcome back to Lily Sin Barreras. I was gone for a week, and I must tell you, it was great for my mental health. And today, I am so honored to be joined by someone who I really trust in this topic. And I have to tell you that I don't think we could say that we are friends. I feel comfortable saying we are sisters in the struggle because I think we've had maybe one cup of coffee one time and then we continue like show up in the same places all the time. But welcome to Lily Sin Barreras. I just want to point out a couple of beautiful things that have been taking place. And then we will pause and talk about our sponsors and a little surprise we have for Kathy. She knew a little bit, but doesn't know it all. So that's how we do it. That's the Puerto Rican way. We want to show you a lot of love. Today, we will be speaking about mental health, the importance of knowing what your rights are, as well as that there is an entity who's been there for a while and continues to be your advocate and your voice. But you know what's interesting about this particular agency is they work on what you really want. It's not an assumption of what they believe is right for you. And that's what makes them truly unique to me. So I am blessed to have the executive director, Kathy Flaherty, who never thinks my show is too small for her to come on. So I want to welcome you. No, some people do. I want to welcome you because we have no time to waste with this guest. I also want to invite all of you to send positive energy to all of those who are struggling right now because they need you, but they also need our voices, our actions, our love, our check-in, all of that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's not even to talk about what the matter at hand. It's just to say, hi, I love you. How you doing? My coffee sucks. How's yours? So let's bring on, I'm on tea tonight. It's one of those. So let's bring on this person I've been telling you about all week. Here she is. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, how are you?
I am blessed to have you. Kathy is the executive director of the Connecticut Legal Rights Project. And you will see in the crawler down there the number that you can call at any point in time and write it down, and it will be around. And my marketing team is going to put it out for you just the way they put that slideshow out there so you can get different sides of Kathy. Before I introduce Kathy, as I believe I would love to introduce her, I received her bio, which I thought was very shy because I know some of her work. Of course, I don't know all her work, but I thought it was very shy, and I add that to humbleness, but consistent. And this is the first bio I'm ever have ever read on my show.
Oh,
You don't know, Kathy.
I
I
did
look
not
at
know that.
bios. Yes, I look at bios. I get what I want from it, the meat of it. But this bio, I think you guys will want to listen to because then you will see the consistency in her work. Doesn't matter where she is. And she loves to run. We'll talk about that later. I don't understand that at all. If there's not a gun to my head, I don't understand why I'm running. My husband is a runner as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, since 2015, it feels like it was yesterday that I met you. Kathy has served as the executive director of the Connecticut Legal Rights Project. CLRP is what you'll hear, a statewide nonprofit agency which provides legal services to low income individuals with mental health conditions, people like me, who reside in hospitals or the community on matters related to their treatment, recovery, and civil rights. I'll let her explain what civil rights include. Prior to coming to CLRP, Kathy spent 13 years as the staff attorney at Statewide Legal Services of Connecticut, the centralized intake hotline for all Connecticut legal services programs. A graduate of Wesley College. No chump change, I must say. Um, I didn't do all of that. So what I hear is that it's big, big, big in Harvard Law. Woo, woo. Girls kicking it. Kathy has dedicated her professional life to advocate for the rights of those underserved. But here it is. Kathy combines her personal, not many times you get to have someone in leadership being able to say this. Kathy combines her personal experience as a recipient of mental health services and her legal background to speak to issues affecting those living with mental health conditions. Kathy is currently a member. Here's where you go, guys. Make note of this. This is where consistency is important. No, this is very important because you check out the boards that people are on and all of that kind of stuff, and you go, flake, flake. Well, at least I don't. She can't say that, but I can. Flake, flake. Kathy is currently a member of the board of directors of Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers. I didn't even know that. The State Lawyer Assistant Program. She's a member of the advisory board of the Connecticut Alliance to Benefit Law Enforcement. Cable. Kathy is the co-chair of the Keep the Promise Coalition, a coalition of advocates, people living with mental health conditions, family members, mental health professionals, and interested community members like me. I'm not on the board, but it would be someone like me, with a vision of a state in which people with mental health conditions are able to live successfully in the community because they have access, listen, to housing and other community-based supports and services that are recovery oriented. Person driven, person driven. We'll repeat that one more time because it's a nugget, golden nugget. Person driven and holistic in their approach to wellness. She is also a member of the steering committee of the Connecticut Cross Disability Lifespan Alliance, an alliance of people of all ages with all disabilities who pursue an unified agenda in support of building a great life in the community. So I hope you guys listen to that. But I want to highlight something. There was a time I was so ill, I could not read this. So this is a yay, Lydia. So I hope that most of you who are, and I know lots of people are connecting here because they um, know that those are the victories you can celebrate, right? When you get to read, look at this. This is not a whole novel. I get to read this. And I think she's really shy and humble about her work in the community. Welcome, Kathy. All that mumbo jumbo
Thank
to
you.
say, welcome, Kathy.
Thank you so much for having me. And I actually think that's a slightly out of date bio, for which I apologize for not getting you one that's more current, because some of those things are things that I've had to give up over the course of the past year because I haven't been well and have been recovering from COVID. But I am a former member of the board for cable, and I'm the former co-chair of Keep the Promise. And they actually just revised their mission and vision this year, pretty much still in line with those big points that you outlined, especially the things that you highlighted about being person driven and person centered. But I think it might be great to for you to connect with the new leadership of KTP and have them on your show. And I'm sure they'd really be interested in doing that. So I can certainly hopefully make that connection for you.
I would love that. And the only reason I'm going to bring this little piece about COVID in is because Kathy and I at a studio at the time, a physical studio, came in, and it was not what, Kathy, 2 weeks later, if that, that
Yeah.
Kathy got diagnosed and immediately contacted me and said, Lydia, I want you to know. And then it felt like everybody in the world that I knew of was being impacted different to others. My husband, it was very scary when he got it. Mine was more like fluish. I'm gonna survive it. When my husband got it, and I work grassroots. I'm in the streets, I'm like out there. When my husband got it, it was terrifying. My daughter has just survived it. It was really bad for her. She has a heart condition. Her partner did too, and my granddaughter. So all I'm saying is, Kathy has been struggling. If you haven't, look up her page. She's been on every media you can imagine. This is a long term, it's been a long haul for you, Kathy. Can I say that?
You certainly can. And it certainly has been. And I hope at some point that we get to the other side of it. But I just really think that, people, we are very much in terms of advocating for people's individual choices. But I think when you're talking about public health, it's a little different. So I really just encourage everybody, please, if you can, because recognizing some people can't, please get vaccinated. Please wear a mask. Please wash your hands. Please do all the things you need to do to not only keep yourself safe, but to help create safety for all of us.
I totally agree. Totally agree. We in this house decided to get vaccinated. And I love, and I copied you, your little circle by I too. I am distrusting of the system,
Yeah.
but I need to get vaccinated because advocates, this is what we do. We have to daily assess, what's being told to us, how we're going to deal with it. Are we really getting all of the information, so on and so forth? But I do want to live, and that was the choice we made in this house. I did not at any point in time like what Kathy was going through. I just thought it was like forever and ever and ever and ever. And every time I saw her, it was even scarier and scarier. So that said, you're speaking to people who have survived it. I cannot compare my journey with Kathy's, but my husband, it was terrifying when we had to have that conversation of where's our paperwork? Because people were going in and not necessarily coming out.
That's true.
And so this is my buddy, my lifetime partner. I'm sure your husband felt exactly the way I was
He did.
feeling.
Yeah, and I
Um,
went into the emergency room, and I still just remember it was truly the worst day of my life because they wouldn't even let us hug goodbye. Um, they're just like, "We're taking her in," and I didn't know if I was gonna see him again. Thankfully, I did, but, yeah.
and
It's
you
a
guys
mental
are just
slog, and I think that's really almost the hard it's almost easier to and you may know this too, is like even it depending on how sick you are, it's worse seeing somebody you love not feel well than it is to be sick yourself. At least that's my experience.
Yeah, I went through a lot of guilt. I had to call my therapist. I was convinced, I brought it in the house, the whole 9 yards. I was just and, so it was tough. I just wanna say hello, and this is what we do when we're here, and you'll see some of the comments come up, Kathy. I wanna say hello to Puerto Rico. I love you too, Rivera de Jesus Berenice, Mokoyoma, who happens to be my daughter who survived COVID and it was pretty serious. My mama, oh God, I have to behave again. I never have. She's like, whatever, you
Oh,
never have.
mom's watching. We're in trouble.
Yeah, Wanda Ellers, my ride or die, the Lily Tribe, Margarita Gonzalez, Marilyn Leiva, Edward Hines, who is a friend of the movement, a friend of this house, Misoti Santiago, who has an absolute beautiful book. You guys must read, must read. We've had her here a couple of times. It's called God's Diamond. It's not about religious freaks, it's just about finding yourself. And man, has she been through some stuff. So I always encourage people to, we have authors in our communities, and they're not always in the bookshelves that we want to see them. So welcome everybody, and we'll continue to put up the comments. So Kathy, the Connecticut Legal Rights Project, you have a very, very difficult job. You have such a unique ability, and I've seen you in action. So I always like to tell this one story, if I may, before I let you go, because when you
Okay.
hear her, you're gonna be like, "Oh, bring her back. When do we get her?" Um, I had the opportunity to work at the Connecticut Legal Rights Project. Kathy taught me these words. It was not the right match for me. I had different words, but Kathy taught me these, and she was right. Um, that said, I walked into a conference room with Kathy, and she's looking around in this particular area where they serve people with mental health challenges, just like mine, schizophrenia, you name it. We were all in the building, serving and receiving and receiving and serving. And the comment that Kathy made really blew me out of the water. She says, "Is there any holistic information around here?" So she was looking not only for the clinical, she was looking for the holistic. And it was so reinforcing for me because I do a lot of holistic stuff. I use traditional medication. I've never shied away from saying it. And I do a lot of holistic stuff because I feel like it's a good combination for me. So I just wanted to share you guys with you guys that that was a moment where I thought, crap, this is the right leader. This is the right leader. And she was just in the process of coming on. So we knew nothing. I mean, I had no experience with Kathy. It was just being in the room and listening to her. We've been to the Women's March together. We've had the opportunity to share spaces, webinars, that kind of thing. But obviously, Kathy is a beautiful jewel in our community, and not everybody knows about her.
Thank you.
And we're very grateful. So Kathy, tell us a little bit, because it would take 5 shows, in which I'm happy to do, about the Connecticut Legal Rights Project for those of you who don't know.
Sure. So Connecticut Legal Rights Project is a legal aid agency. We serve people in the entire state. And we represent people in civil legal matters. That means we're not involved in any kind of criminal legal cases, but we protect people's rights in housing, in not in family, um, social security, access to education, employment. And we were set up as a result of a lawsuit against the state of Connecticut Department of Mental Health back in the late 80s. The Connecticut Civil Liberties Union sued the state of Connecticut because people who were patients in what was then 3 large state hospitals didn't have access to lawyers. So at the time, there was Connecticut Valley Hospital, of which Whiting was a division of it. There was Fairfield Hills in Norwich State. Fairfield Hills and Norwich State have since closed. Whiting Forensic is a separate hospital from Connecticut Valley Hospital, but there are also small facilities in Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport. And so a big part of what we do is represent people who are stuck on those inpatient units so they can get out and back to their lives in the community. And then we also represent people in the community when their mental health is impacting their rights in those areas. So somebody who might be facing eviction because of disability related behavior and needs a reasonable accommodation to stay in their housing. Perhaps somebody has a record of having not great behavior that, again, related to their disability. Requesting that reasonable accommodation may enable them to get into housing. People who've been denied Social Security benefits, people who are getting discriminated against either at school, 18 plus, so trying to get the special ed transition services, or maybe in higher education, having an issue, or even employment. We've had people who've been hired at jobs and, job coaches have told the employer that they're eligible for a tax break. And instead of thanking the job coach, sometimes employers react badly and say, well, why didn't this person disclose the disability that they had no obligation to disclose? And then when they find out it's a psychiatric disability, have gone so far as to say things like, we don't want people like you working here. And that, of course, enables somebody to go to the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities and file a complaint and perhaps get a little bit of money, but money rarely replaces things. That's really all the legal system can offer people when something like that happens. And it's not always enough of a replacement, but it's what you can do. So I think the other thing that we do a lot of work on, and especially you hear a lot of the conversation about hashtag Free Britney. We do a lot of work with people who have been subjected to conservatorships to either help them get out from under them, or to modify them, or to change the conservator, or to challenge some of the actions that a conservator is proposing to take if it's not in line with what the person wants.
Kathy, not all of us know what the conservator is. Can you help us out with?
That's a great point. What can happen is when a person is not capable of either making decisions in the first place, or perhaps would be capable of making the decision but can't effectively communicate the decision, there is the possibility that somebody, and it could sometimes be a hospital, but it can sometimes be just a family member, petitions the probate court to appoint what's called a conservator for a person. In some other states, they sometimes call it guardianship, but in Connecticut, guardianship is only for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Conservatorship is that legal authority, and that applies to people with mental health conditions or maybe age-related conditions like dementia. They can apply for either a conservatorship of the estate, which means you're just controlling the person's money, or sometimes they appoint a conservator of the person, which makes decisions about where you live and what kind of medical treatment you have. When it comes to psychiatric medication, they can't just do a regular conservatorship. They have another legal burden of proof to meet, but then they can be given authority to make decisions about psychiatric medication. Because unlike other medical treatment, If you think about when you go to the hospital for help, you go to the emergency room, you've been sitting there for way too long and you're like, forget it, I just want to go home. They may have you sign a piece of paper that says you're leaving against medical advice, but you still get to walk out the door. If you show up to an emergency room for psychiatric reasons, that's not going to happen because a hospital can legally petition to be able to keep you for a certain amount of time. And if they choose not to unlock the door, you don't get to go home till they let you out or until you file in court and the court decides that they don't have the authority to hold you anymore. And those can be challenging cases for people to win.
There's so much to cover. The Connecticut Legal Rights Project is unique in the fact that if you are in a psych unit, they can go and visit you. They can go and hear what you have to say. They can take down all of your information. They can make an assessment and also become your advocate. But here is some of the stuff that I don't think people know. In the state of Connecticut, and I can tell, I always use myself because it's easier for people. For example, I was in something that's called 4 Points, right? And a lot of people describe it as Jesus Christ on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had a severe headache on this unit, which then led my mother to like figure out this is something else is going on. And then they were able to diagnose, the TBI and so on and so forth. But my headache was so bad that I was holding really tight. I remember so tight, as tight as I could, because I could not deal with the headache. And I expressed the pain that I was feeling, but you put everything in what? That's just her mental health. And when I woke up, I was in 4 Points. It was extremely difficult for my family. They couldn't have an answer. They said I was violent, and my family was like, "You don't understand. Violence is not her first choice. This is the kid that's always, let's find a better way." Um, I don't remember anything after the shot at all. Nothing. So I just want people to know that these things do happen. It happened to me recently, and I'll let you speak on this, Kathy. Recently, I had a very close person to me enter into the psych unit. They needed the aid, so on and so forth. They were released, okay, with some of my advocacy because no one on this staff of this particular hospital spoke Spanish. So this person could not participate of any of the groups
Amazing.
if chosen. They gave them crayons. I have my own jokes about crayons. They gave them crayons. And this person was like, I don't even understand what anybody is saying. It's 2021
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't find someone. I'm not talking about a translator. That's a very different thing, folks. I'm talking at a professional that could have spoken to this person in Spanish. There was no one else on the unit either that could speak to this particular person in Spanish. And that was the reason that I advocated that he needed different services and the unit was not being helpful to him. So this is 2021. This is now. This was not 10 years ago. Kathy, can you tell us a little bit about what do we do in situations like this?
Well, I think one of the things that anybody should remember if this happens to you or to someone you love, that whether it's a public psychiatric facility or a private psychiatric facility, of which we have plenty in Connecticut, there is a set of laws called the Patient's Bill of Rights in Connecticut that applies to both inpatient and outpatient facilities for mental health treatment. And the same way we've got a Bill of Rights in the US Constitution that says you have the right to this, that, and the other thing, and that the government shall or shall not do these certain things. It's requirements that are placed on the hospital in terms of respecting people's rights. So among the things that people often think of, you have the right to communicate with the outside world. Unfortunately, that's one of the laws that really needs to be updated because this was passed in the early 1970s. So what you have is access to a communal phone and you have access to writing paper and stamps and envelopes. And I think we all know that that's really not the way people communicate anymore or stay in touch. And one of the things that I would very much like to see the legislature do is update the Patient's Bill of Rights for people in psychiatric facilities the same way they did this past session for people in nursing homes, saying that people have the right to technology. And so that people should have, if they have a cell phone, they should have the right to be able to keep their cell phone on them. They should have the right to be able to access the internet and social media. That's how people, communicate with the outside world. I still, remember, because I am on social media a lot, that when I saw people literally live tweeting their experience in the hospital, and I was like, how are you doing that? Because I know here, having been in hospitals myself, and even as a lawyer representing clients, they sometimes confiscate my cell phone. I'm like, how did you ever do this? And it turns out in other countries, people are allowed to keep their cell phones with them. And, you know, when you talk about how important maintaining connections to community are for people, especially when people are in distress, I think that's super important. So that's just one example of a right that people have. All the rules regarding forced medication, the right to be treated with dignity and respect, which I think a lot of people who've been in the system, again, whether in a public facility or a private facility, say that it's the exception that meets the rule, because it doesn't really feel like you're treated with a whole lot of dignity and respect, especially when you're there against your will.
I think it's you already have questions, so which I knew was going to happen. So we're
Okay,
going to have you back several times, and you're going to become one of those guests like Dr. Figueroa that
that's
people are
fine.
always saying, "Come back." She always has to come back. Um, one of the questions that I have, and that's why you see me looking at my pad, because people feel comfortable on putting it on Facebook, other people inbox me, so on and so forth, says, I have been a patient for over 15 years. I hide my meds from my husband. To this day, he does not know that I take anxiety medication. He believes that I should only speak to my pastor about things like that. And it's not really anxiety, it's a woman's issue.
Mm,
And so her true question after saying that is there any way that I can ask my provider to give me a shot? Or I've heard of these things um, in the past, so I don't have to take meds on a daily basis. I always recommend people speak to their providers
That's what I was
before
that
they.
was gonna be my first thing, is talk to your provider about that. Most of the long-acting medications are what's called antipsychotics, and they can make those as long-acting forms of the drugs. I am not a doctor. I did not go to medical school. I don't try to play one on TV. I just remind people I'm a lawyer. I mean, I have my own personal experience of having taken psych meds for the better part of 2 decades. I think one time I was in the hospital, a resident did out a chart of all the different medications I was on, and it was like 32 of them, not all at the same time, but like they were always trying to find the thing that works. Um, and what I tell people, and I think that's the hardest part. I think when you feel like you have to hide a part of yourself from somebody who's in your life who's really important to you, that just makes it really challenging to just be in the world. I think that's one, sometimes people ask me why I've been so open about my diagnoses for as long as I can. And I will say, honestly, the first time I came out about my mental illness, what I conceived of is that I was just really pissed off about something. Other students were interviewed by our law school newspaper and were making what I thought were really derogatory comments about another student who was clearly struggling. Not somebody I knew, but like there was something going on in the dorms because somebody just really was having a hard time. And I was just so angry at the way people were acting towards somebody else with a mental health condition that I wrote an op-ed for the law school newspaper. And so I didn't really think through the consequences of that. I just was mad. And sometimes that happens when I get mad. I don't really think through consequences. I just act first and figure things out later. But then after that first time, it became easier. And and this is where I guess we talk about some of the stigma, the fact that, you're the person who wrote in or called in said her husband thinks you should only talk to your pastor about it. And I know that is really common in some cultures. And it may be worth talking to your pastor, because I know a lot of the organizations that raise awareness really try to make an effort to reach out to the faith community, because they know how important that support from faith is for people. And if your pastor isn't involved in the ministerial health fellowship, perhaps your pastor wants to get connected to them, because maybe your pastor can help you have that conversation with your husband and help him to try to realize that, this isn't all in your head, or just because, and I think
Mhm.
that's the hardest thing. I know for me, it was my family didn't understand what was going on either when I was struggling most, with what was going on for me. And they weren't sure if I was maybe using drugs, because I was very, very manic my first year of law school, which is when I got put into the hospital against my will. So my parents were just like looking for an explanation of everything. There are classes like National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI Connecticut has a whole family to family class, but your husband might not be ready for that, so might need a gentler introduction to just the concept. And some people do have a hard time, and that's where we talk about stigma, we talk about discrimination. But I hope that you are able to find the support that you need.
I think that's very kind, and that's what we're looking for other people to say, you might have an option, you might have avenues, you might have another way. But I must say, on my part, and I'm not a lawyer, on my part, I have to say congratulations, because you're still taking care of you. And so you're still making yourself important and a priority. And I know it sounds almost crazy, but you're still, even though you're not telling your husband, you're still trying to get the best version of you. So congratulations. I know a lot of people who refuse to even do that piece because they're so terrified that their partner will find out, female and male.
That's true.
Um, and so congratulations to you for even stepping out and saying, I need to take care of me. I just wish I could do it, with my partner on board, but still I'm going to take care of me.
And I think
So
that is key. Like, don't if he's not there yet, but you are, do what you just keep doing what you need to do. And there may be options where you can get something that's more long acting, but I'm not aware that they have those for anxiety disorders. Like I said, I really think the long acting stuff tends to be antipsychotics, which are pretty strong medications. So you wouldn't want to take that just for the long acting part of it.
So Kathy, stay with us. You're not going off camera, but I do have to thank some people. So this is where we take that break. They break your video so that way people can have it in two pieces, and they love that. I want to thank Carla Medina, Sudol Taino, Divinely Fit. They were an amazing event this weekend. I wasn't able to be there, but my team did a fabulous job. You guys will soon see how well they did. It was wonderful. Exercises turned out to be magical for a lot of people. I know it is for me. I'm not a runner, unless I'm holding ice cream. I tell people all the time, is there ice cream involved as I run? However, I love the yoga and I love other things. And so exercise has been really, really helpful for me. The vain side of me is always, like, okay, that's great. But my mental health, I can see the difference when I work out and when I don't. So that's just me. I also want to send our love to our sister Sarah Raskin, who has from the physical body of her father. And we love Sarah. Sarah, we're thinking about you. We love you. She made it public. That's the only reason I'm saying that. We also want to thank those who write in, the silent partners. Kathy has been one of those, believe it or not, when I'm doing grassroots, she has sent me through PayPal money and I send her pictures of everything she did. She's like, it doesn't matter. I'm like, but I want you to see what your money actually does. You bought shoes, lots of shoes. So there are many people who join the movement. The reason I've chosen not to be a nonprofit is because I want to go and pop my tent wherever I want, and whatever I have, I will share it. And then with trainings and other things, I get to move my budget forward. I also want to thank Jeffrey Dressler. Uh, their law firm is always able, willing to work with us and sponsor us financially when we need it. And Mr. Joe Sarasulo, who always sends in his donation and says, go do something, kid, with that. And we love him for that. Let's return back to the executive director of the Connecticut Legal Rights Project, who has joined us today. And her name is Kathy Flaherty. At the bottom, as a crawler, or at the bottom, you will see the number. So once she is gone from the screen, you can still call the agency. There's an intake process. And I must say this, their intake process is very kind, very kind. One of the things, Kathy, if I may, would love to hear from you, and it's one of the reasons I've always bring you guys out to the light, is most people will ask you, or entities, for a document from a doctor that says that you've been diagnosed with A, B, or C, or D. And perceived is a word that you all use very much.